Welcome to the Wednesday, December 13, 2023 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Design Review Board. This meeting is held electronically, and we intend to conduct this meeting similar to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues, not difficulties. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-852-5247 or 888-788-0099. It's toll free. And enter meeting ID 974-617-49412. If you didn't have a pencil handy, I'm not going to read it again. This information is also available on the published agenda and the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN Channel 16, AT&T Channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. The Design Review Board is a volunteer resident board appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council. The purpose of the Design Review Board is to foster excellence in the design of Ann Arbor's built environment and to advise applicants on how a project can meet the spirit and intent of the downtown design guidelines. First, the applicant will have 15 minutes to present their proposed project to the Design Review Board. Then the Design Review Board will hold a discussion on the design of the project. Following the presentation and discussion, members of the public are permitted to comment for up to 3 minutes. And for a roll call, Hank, will you do the honors, please?
Yes, I would be happy to. If I could just make one more plea for board members who may be waiting to raise their hand to be promoted to panelist. I see that William Kinley is in the attendee list and want to make sure we can promote them. If you are able to go on camera, that would also be great for our public.
I'm in a car, so I was in with low battery, so I was gonna kind of try to keep my camera off to help with that, but I can keep it on for right now. Or maybe once we start talking, I'll put it back on.
Are you driving too, Tamara?
No, I'm not driving.
I thought, wow.
No.
I'm also going to rename myself so that folks know who I am. I am Hank Kelly, Deputy Planning Manager, and I can now start roll call. Jeff Perkins.
Here.
Lori Singleton.
Here.
Tamara Burns.
Here.
With a note that Gary Cooper has submitted a resignation and will no longer be serving on the DRB. William Kinley.
Here.
Richard Mitchell.
Here.
Wendy Ramson.
Here.
John Kotarski.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. So moving on to approval of the agenda. If there are any questions, let us know. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, now the approval of minutes. Approval of minutes from the April 12th. My God, is that the last time we met? April 12th, 2023 meeting, which I was not in attendance at. I think Lori stood in for me. So anyway, any questions about the minutes? Otherwise, entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public comment. To speak during the public comment, here again, I'll repeat those numbers. So if you need a pencil, grab one. Please call 877-852-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 974-6174-9412. I know I asked this at a previous meeting, but I hope CTN is able to get that up on the screen. I can't imagine people have time to go grab a pad and pencil and write that down. So, is there any way to find out if that's happening?
I can have a staff member contact CTN, but unless they are able to unmute and speak to us right now, I can't get an instantaneous response.
All right, let's follow up on that. Otherwise, it's just a waste to go through the numbers twice if we can't publish it in visual form. Moving on to thank you. Moving on to regular business. We are looking at, we're still back in public comment. Is there anybody there?
So on Zoom, I would also invite anyone who is attending by Zoom to raise their hand. There are folks raising their hands right now. They'll have 3 minutes to address you, and I'll put a timer up on the screen. So currently there are 5 hands raised. And 6 hands raised, and our first speaker is Kevon Hemati. You have permission to address the Design Review Board for 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Kevon Hemati, and I'm just here to basically talk about my opinions on the developments, just my public comment on the yeah. So like I was trying to say, obviously I'm here to talk about Pinball Pete's. Pinball Pete's, it's a part of Ann Arbor culture, and it's been around for nearly 3 decades, and it's provided a safe space for Ann Arbor's youth to spend their time and their free time at. It's one of the few places where younger adults can, spend time together without the expectation that they need to drink, because there's so many bars around. There really aren't any other third spaces for young adults such as Ann Arbor's, University of Michigan students spend time. And I want to reiterate that Pinball Pizza isn't just another bar. It's not a bar at all. It provides a space for students who are both under 21 and who may not want to drink, such as recovering alcoholics, people who just don't want to drink because that's not their thing. And I feel like with the new developments, if that leads to the destruction of such a space, that it would be devastating for Ann Arbor, because it's part of Ann Arbor's culture. Ann Arbor has such a great culture, and I feel like all these historical places are slowly being torn down for expensive housing and things that don't really benefit the general public. And it's also one of the last few existing arcades, which I think is, again, a very important part of Ann Arbor's culture. I think it's almost priceless. And I feel like I understand that the city has to do something about it. I get it. But whatever it has to do, I feel like it would be important for the city to make some sort of accommodation to keep Pinball Pete's in one way or another, whether it is compensation or in any way to, work with Pinball Pete's in order to make sure that Ann Arbor stays Ann Arbor. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next caller is Lucas Renault. You have permission to address the Design Review Board for 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello, I am Lucas Renault, and I've been a proud Ann Arbor resident for over 20 years. Forgive me if you hear any background noise. I'm actually outside the city hall right now because I thought this was going to be an in-person meeting. Guess that shows how much I care about this issue. Yes, I am also here to speak on the project that threatens to demolish Pinball Pete's, though I'd like to take a different angle. The developers initially promised that this project would help alleviate concerns with affordable housing and car dependency in Ann Arbor, for which are, of course, both issues I care a lot about. I am very much aware how Ann Arbor, like many American cities, has well-known problems with these things. However, what the developers have shown us of their plan so far have not made me confident in believing that this project would actually address these concerns. For one, they included way more parking than they needed to, even though that is no longer a requirement for new developments. And for second, they aren't even sure how much the new units in this place will cost, as was revealed in their first public comment meeting thing last week, I believe. With all that in mind, I believe it would be unconscionable to approve a project that would make all of these issues with Ann Arbor worse, and in the process also destroy a treasured Ann Arbor landmark. I think there are plenty of spaces in Ann Arbor that are way more suited to development, empty spaces that could otherwise be new places for businesses, new affordable housing for people. And we should really refrain from approving projects that would demolish perfectly serviceable buildings, let alone treasured pieces of Ann Arbor history. I think that is everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next caller is Hannah Myers. You have permission to address the DRB.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So my name is Hannah Myers, and I live in Ann Arbor. I'm commenting today on the 228 Packard project. First, let me share a little bit about my background. I'm a registered architect with over a decade of experience. I have a master's degree in urban design, and I'm currently pursuing a PhD in design science with a focus on neighborhood design for social well-being. So I just want to talk a little bit about this building. There's a lot of issues that I see with this building. It's far out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood fabric, both present and future, when considering the University of Michigan's plans for developing the surrounding blocks. This extreme disparity in massing is going to cause, it brings up aesthetic concerns, characteristic concerns for the neighborhood, and there's going to be disruptions to the distribution of light and air to the existing neighborhood around that building. So also the extreme increase in residential density will introduce hundreds of new private vehicles right in the middle of an area that is intended to become a transit hub, which seems at cross purposes. In general, actually, this building seems to be working at cross purposes to many of the values that the city of Ann Arbor has been trying to incorporate into our unified development plan. I understand that there is a housing shortage. We're all very aware that there needs to be more housing stock in this city. But the housing stock that we need isn't homogeneous. It's not a binary, yes, we need more housing, or no, we don't. We need to first ask, what type of housing are we lacking in this city? We're lacking affordable housing, missing middle housing. The question isn't what type of housing can the market support in this city, but what type of housing is missing in this city. And I don't doubt that a 400 unit luxury apartment building sited next to one of the most expensive public research universities in the country would quickly reach and maintain occupancy, but it would ultimately be detrimental to the economic sustainability of our city. So that's what I'm primarily worried about. I feel that this building is failing to advance both economic and social sustainability in this city. And I think that it should be reconsidered and at least scaled down a great deal. So I'll go ahead and take my comments offline now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Samuel. You have permission to address the DRB.
Okay, I'm here with both the owners of Pinball Pete's, all three of us. So I'm just holding the iPad while they proceed to speak. Go ahead, boss.
Hi, I'd just like to speak on behalf of Pinball Pete's and thank the community for all the support that they've shown us. And we are obviously here because our future is hanging basically from that building if it is built. So just want to ask the city to consider, if this is the proper building for that area. And if this is really a step in the direction that the city of Ann Arbor wants to go. And again, my name is Ted Arnold from Pinball Pete's.
And we'll
Thank
go
you.
to the next person here. Nope. Okay. All right. I'll take these last 2 minutes. My name is Samuel Hayes. I work in Washtenaw County and I live here as well. And I would just like to address what the developer consistently brings up when we're asking questions about these new developments, which is that they have been tasked by the Ann Arbor City Council to build affordable housing inside of the city limits. I'm not quite sure what the city council defines as affordable, but I impressed them to go online and take some ganders at how much just a bed, not even a full unit, but a bed down the street from where I am standing in their council chambers right now, where everyone else is curiously absent, might I say, and how much those beds cost at the standard. And ask yourself, if we tear down Pinball Pete's and put in 17 floors of that madness, if that's going to make your city any more or less affordable. It's going to make it less affordable because you're putting in these things for college students, but they're not going to help any college students that I live next to in Ypsilanti. They're only going to help the top of the line, full of scholarship and full of money and inheritances, students that go to the University of Michigan. It will not benefit your city. It will only benefit the university that I can only presume is lining the pockets of this fair town. With that being said, I encourage the people that the city of Ann Arbor voted for to look deep down in their consciences and figure out what they want to make the city look like in the next 10 years and realize that if they let this go on the way it's going, I understand the city has to do something and understand that there's a right for land to transfer hands. But if the city council does not make it known that they made an effort to save this building, save this piece of culture, in 10 years and 4 years, when you have to look at these children and ask them to reelect you, say to a senatorship or a representation of state senate, you will not have those votes because they will remember this, I promise you, because I will be here to remind them. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
To the chair, I want to give an update that there are 4 hands raised. Some additional callers have raised their hand. And I want to confirm that CTN is posting the number on the broadcast for today's meeting. So phone callers are able to call in. And I just want to let the public commenters know that if you hang on to watch the rest of the meeting, we can provide information and staff comments about how you can continue to engage, because the design review board is not the final board that will board commission that will review these projects. So staff, please make sure to include that in your introductions and comments. Our next caller is phone number ending in 416. You have permission to address the design review board. Maybe one of my staff can help me. Is it *6 or *9 to unmute when you call by phone?
Sorry, I can check. I wasn't sure offhand.
Phone number ending in 416. Are you able to speak? I see that you're unmuted.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry. This is Dennis and Connie Burke calling. We currently are one of the family owned homes. We're at 528 South 4th Avenue. So we are directly across the street from this massive development. And we have actually bought a home that was built in 1898 and did extensive tear down, remodeling, repair, and invested and lived here since the late 70s. So we've seen a lot go on in this neighborhood, and we've generally been in favor of the higher density buildings that have gone up and totally starting to surround us. But this particular project is extremely distressing to me simply because they're tearing down so many houses directly across the street in the old south end of the old German neighborhood. And we would be facing an 8-story parking garage, which I find quite astounding because I walk around town quite frequently, and I rarely, if ever, see any of the parking structures occupied to the point that nobody can park. The city of Ann Arbor has a large parking building half a block away. We have parking lots a half a block away. We have the big parking underground structure next to the library. We have Fingerly's along the railroad tracks, many parking lots that are available to the public. They're never full. So I can't see any reason a development like this would put up an 8-story parking structure. And I'm also very concerned that this is a residential area. It's going to continue to be because of the housing developments that the university is putting up a half a block away. And the bicycle and pedestrian traffic trying to mix with commuters coming in and out, filling up parking buildings in the morning and exiting in the evening is quite extreme. So I don't see how this design in general fits with the neighborhood characteristics. I'm very concerned about what it will do to the characteristics of the neighborhood and what it will do for the mix of vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic in the neighborhood. So that's our basis of our comments, and I hope that the Design Review Board will look at this project negatively, primarily because of the parking situation and also the size of these structures compared to the rest of the housing in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Beverly Strassman. You have permission to address the DRB. I have invited you to unmute. I'll just give it a second. I'm going to leave that hand raised and hope you can resolve audio issues. Beverly, our next caller is Jeffrey Ratliff. You have permission to address the DRB.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I am a longtime resident of Ann Arbor. It seems that a lot of these sky rises seem to be designed not to house many of these small local businesses that we've come to love in Ann Arbor, but rather push them out in favor of more corporate businesses that can afford the higher rents. I think I speak for a lot of people in Ann Arbor when I say that that pattern has become very exhausting. I will keep the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Howie Yang. You have permission to address the DRB.
Yeah, I'm Howie Young. I'm trying to I'm try to voice some of my opinion on the 228 Packard project. Many of us are attracted to Ann Arbor for her unique charm and heritage. And living and working in downtown, we cherish her beauty. I'm all for development and modernization to address mid or long-term goal of the city. However, I'm concerned with the mega building at 12 to 13 story building as proposed with such a high density, and how could it be coherent with the neighboring area we have today? And history told us that it's easy to develop and destroy something, but we will never be able to recover if we later found we made a mistake. So I would be very careful, to review and suggest to push this project as currently proposed, because once it is done, it will never be never be undo in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Ann Eisen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is about the 228 Packard project. So I don't believe that even the developer is serious about this inappropriate plan. We need housing for people who live and work or study in Ann Arbor, who like to walk or bike, and who want to use public transportation. This location is 1.5 blocks from the buses to everywhere. It is within walking distance of all downtown and central campus, including grocery stores. The location is perfect for people of any income level who choose not to own cars and who appreciate what our downtown offers. This project would build 400 parking spaces for apartments that would be unaffordable because of the cost to build and maintain a parking space for every unit. It would replace the existing affordable housing. Traffic from hundreds of additional cars would obstruct the existing bus routes and make this area less desirable and less safe for people who live there or who walk or bike into town from neighborhoods like the Old West Side, from existing student housing on South Main, and from the planned U of M dormitory on the old Fingerly lot. Recent construction leaves me concerned about what our city will allow. The standard luxury student apartments on Main between Packard and William is right behind my house. They do not provide parking for deliveries and pickups. They use my private parking for that, and they block the bike lanes. If you're going to build bike lanes, we need a curb between the bike lane and the street. Anything less than that means there will be vehicles blocking the bike lanes and the bicyclists will veer into traffic. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
The other caller that had audio issues has since lowered their hand, and our last caller is Piotr Michalowski. If I said that right, you can let us know.
You hear me now?
A little low
Yes.
volume, but yes.
Well, thank you for pronouncing my name pretty well. I live across the street also from on the corner of 4th Avenue and Packard, across the street from Ken Eisen, who just spoke, and have serious concerns about this. I cannot see why this is now the new zoning is proposed. It doesn't meet any of the criteria that I can see from reading the rather complicated definition of this First Street zoning. It doesn't blend at all into the existing environment. In fact, I cannot offhand think of any recent project of this kind that has been surrounded on three sides by people living in small houses. I may be wrong, but I don't know. And there's no concern at all for the people living around it. And it doesn't fit into it design-wise at all, as many people have pointed out. It's a gigantic blob of a mass that was clearly not originally designed for this kind of a space. It was just redesigned to fit the particular contour, and it was never designed with this area in mind. So it makes a mockery of zoning. I'm also concerned with a number of issues other people have already mentioned, and let me just mention the idea of traffic flow. There is no traffic study yet done, but those of us who live here know there are 4 bus routes here. There are people on bicycles. There are also people, I should mention, with disabilities living in the area, and the enormous amount of traffic that would be added. And I also bring your attention to the fact that Madison, which has 1 entry and exit, is right next door to 2 traffic lights that border the railroad tracks. And so there's nothing that can be done to move that. And there will be nothing but backups there. And 4th and 5th Avenue will be unusable with this number of people brought in. And the design doesn't take care of it in any way, accommodate any concern for that. And it just seems to me that none of these buildings ever take into account the fact that there are actually people already living around it. And I think that some concern for that should also be made. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no more callers at this time.
All right. At the end of the meeting, or toward the end of today's meeting, Hank, let's talk a little bit about when we can plug these public comments in. It feels a little bit disjointed to have them occur before the presentations by the project developers. It'd be nice, well, let's say that for the end of the meeting and move on, but if I forget, remind me to bring that up.
There is also a public comment period at the end of the meeting.
Right. Okay, so moving on to regular business, the first item on this agenda is for 228 Packard Street, which we've already heard a little bit about from the public. So if the developers are here, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Yeah, Brad Moore here. Just make sure everybody can hear me. Awesome. I have with me the team for the 228 Packard project. On the team with me are the clients subtext. Those of you on the design review board are probably familiar with a couple of the projects I've done previously with subtext. They include both the Yard down on Main Street and also 611 East University. And the principal architect working with us on this project is ESG out of Minneapolis. You may remember them because I worked with them on the project that's currently under construction, 616 East Washington behind the Michigan Theater. So I have both clients and cohorts with me who are experienced in working in Ann Arbor. As noted in the project memo from Alexis, we started this project initially as a PUD, and so we had our initial meeting with the Planning Commission and took our design cues from that meeting with the Planning Commission. With the recent changes in the zoning ordinance that Council has adopted, it became possible to do the project through D1 zoning rather than going through the PUD process. And so we have shifted to propose putting the project through as a conditional rezoning to D1. to create a kind of a D1.5 that is a hybridized project with both mid-rise and high-rise elements, much like the standard incorporated into their project, which was again a combination of mid-rise and high-rise. So I'll let ESG take the narrative here and run you through some of the design cues and plans and how we've arranged the project. And then, of course, now we have both input from our citizens participation meeting and from our meeting with the Planning Commission. We're soliciting input from you guys so we can craft a final proposal to bring forward.
Great. And is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, and as Brad had alluded to, when we get towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about some of the design moves we've made in response to both the D1 rezone and the community participation meeting. So we'll run through the first handful of these slides pretty quickly so we can get to the bulk of the conversation of questions and comments. So with that, again, I know folks here are all pretty aware of where the site is located, so we'll get through these quickly. But on the fringe of both downtown and the University of Michigan to our east, we are surrounded by Packard, 4th and 5th Avenue, and Madison to our south. The University of Michigan sites are located here in the yellow to see the general adjacencies of sites that are owned by the University of Michigan. Here's an overall elevated view to show proximity to a couple of notable things happening from a development perspective adjacent to our site, the new Elbel Fields, and then the phase 1 and phase 2 residential quads on the University of Michigan. From a site plan perspective, to talk about ingress and egress, our primary drop-off is under the building. This was in an effort to reduce congestion along 5th Avenue, so vehicles are able to pull in and exit out onto the South 5th Avenue. It's similarly with either Ubers or vehicle or food drop-off, et cetera. They're able to pull into the building and then exit on 5th Avenue. There is a service lane that bisects the two buildings. This is where our trash is being picked up. There is an interior courtyard with the taller component on the right side of that O shape, and then the shape to the north and west, the plan north and west, kind of a hockey stick type shape. That is the lower construction, which is a 6-story building with a pool terrace and outdoor amenity on top of the parking structure, which is shielded along 4th Avenue by liner units of residential. Here are some more technical plans. As you can see on the first plan, we're showing a retail grocer on the corner of 4th and Madison. There is some associated retail parking adjacent to there. And then you can see the alley and the tip zone to bring that congestion, to bring that trash services off of the primary street and onto our site. And then we get into the bulk of the residential building where you can see kind of the general layout of the units as they kind of go up the topography of the site here. Getting into some of the building elevations and materiality. This is our east elevation that we're currently looking at. Here we can see the liner units as mentioned. If you can see my green cursor here, these are the liner units that are shielding the adjacent resident buildings from being able to see that parking. So there's a strip of liner units and then parking is buried beyond that. So parking is not visible from the 4th Avenue side. There are walk-up units along the street edge. And then as you can see here, there is a pretty lively retail grocer on this corner here with the primary building rising above it. Materials are both a metal coping. We have EIFS, given its kind of continuous insulation, passive house, and sustainability qualities. We have brick, we have metal panel infill, and then obviously large glass expanses of storefront on our both primary residential amenity and the retail portion in the southwest corner. Here we can see both our west elevation and east elevation. Again, taking note of the topography as it sort of drops from Packard down to Madison, disguising the height of bulk of the building by putting the taller portion along Madison. the northeast elevation, our south elevation, and then this is a cut through the middle of the site to show the only visible portion of parking, which would be on the north side, which we've intended to screen with a live green screen with ivy and vines that are able to kind of grow up the side of that to both shield the parking and to allow the parking garage to breathe a little bit on that side. For some building sections, here are our primary height elevations here. We have our 11-story building over the retail and grocer. That is, again, primarily pushed to the south portion of the site. And then we have our 5- and 6-story residential portions, which range anywhere from 50 to 60, given the topography and grade. We'll run through some renderings. This is a rendering from the Packard and 5th Street corner looking south at the primary residential entry. Here we are at the Madison and 5th Avenue corner looking up at the 12-story portion with the retail and residential lobby at the base of this. Here is a primary elevation along 5th Avenue with the 6-story building and the parking entry. We have a large 2-story glass volume with an interior connecting stair. This is primarily amenities and residential kind of check-in with the various amenities related to the retail or the residential, excuse me, along this level. And then here is our elevation along Madison with that grocery retailer on the corner. And then lastly, here is the 4th and Madison corner. To talk quickly about some of the sustainable features that the development is proposing, we're proposing both heat exchange within the commercial space, given some of the mechanical units down there. We're able to utilize some of the heat that comes off of those coolers as a heat exchange system. We're proposing solar panels on the roof. The multimodal transportation is obviously a big portion of the sustainability of the site, given the various bus routes and alternative transportation options. Native plants and pollinators, and then we'll be pursuing LEED Silver, underground geothermal, and then stormwater management. And then lastly, before we open it up to discussion, we thought we would talk a little bit about what we are proposing as a modification in order to get within the D1 compliance, and then just given some of the community feedback, some of the proposed changes we've looked at. So there are kind of 3 primary components related to the D1 zoning that we've adhered to or changed to adhere to is, again, further articulating the facade to adhere to the First Street character overlay, which is a 66-foot max horizontal module. So you can see along all primary facades, we've limited our max expanse of horizontal frontage to 66 feet. Additionally, we've developed a podium condition such that we're able to meet the 5-foot step back on average, which is a requirement of the D1 zoning and the First Street character overlay. And then articulation of height and variation in module. So if we look at the previous versus proposed, previously we were a more monolithic 12-story building across the Madison corner. We've since reduced the density and brought this section of the building down to a 6-story or 7-story building, excuse me, which again, we really like the way that the articulation creates a little bit of texture in height. And we believe that the reduced density works for the development. And then lastly, here's an aerial view depicting the 2 primary drivers of the character overlay district, which is the horizontal modulation of no more than 66 feet. And then the kind of dark red line you're seeing here is the 5-foot step back from the podium condition to the taller building condition to create that reprieve at the pedestrian realm. And if there are any other comments or questions from the either subtext team, ESG team, or Brad, I think we could probably open it up to questions and comments.
All right, thank you for that. Any further presentation from the development team?
No, thank you all.
All right, then we will move on to comments from board members. So I will just open this up and jump in when you've got something to say.
If I may, I'm wondering if staff can expound a little bit on their report comments. There was some things that were meeting, some things that weren't, some things that have been addressed. But I'm just curious, in particular relative to parking quantity requirements, difference between today's zoning and future zoning. There's a good degree to absorb, and I'm wondering if you can provide a bit more clarification on that.
Sure, thank you. I'd be happy to. I'm Alexis DeLeo, a city planner, and I reviewed this design plan. The staff review is quite minimal. It's mostly introduction. But as part of our work, we do a cursory zoning review. The primary purpose of this is if something is wildly out of compliance, we don't want to waste much design review board time in looking at something that basically cannot be approved. Also, I should mention that the current zoning is R4C multiple family and a little bit of M1 limited industrial, but this project will be coming with a proposed rezoning, and they indicate they are petitioning for D1, the downtown core district, and First Street character overlay, and I believe secondary street frontage designation. And you need those three components in order to get the full breadth of the zoning requirements in the downtown area. Now, how about if I just go through like a 2-minute staff presentation? The project is, we've established where it's located. They've assembled about 22 of the lots on this block. And the lot area is about, it's approaching 4 acres, I believe. There is no minimum lot size in the D1 district. Regarding floor area ratio, just recently, talking last Monday, City Council approved an ordinance that repealed or eliminated the premium option program and changed the floor area ratio maximum in the D1 and D2 district from whatever they were to none. But that does not mean that buildings and development is completely unregulated. The maximum height limits still apply, and the front setback, side setback, the massing and articulation standards and so forth, they do still apply. So going through those standards, my review and the staff report was based on the original presentation. It appeared at that time that the front setback, which is a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 10 feet, appeared to comply. Side setback just applies on a very small portion of this site where the site abuts the other interior lots in the block. It probably complied. It was a little bit hard to tell just from the design plans. There was no defined street wall, which is required minimum 2-story and maximum 3-story. I see from the presentation, I think they may have corrected that, and it complies. And originally there was no offset at the top of the street wall. Again, I think they've actually provided that now. Massing articulation, again, was not a previously compliant. I think they may have complied now at 66-foot maximum articulation. There is no maximum tower diagonal in the First Street character overlay district, nor is there any building coverage or open space requirement in the D1 district. As a side note, I believe this is the first time the design review board has looked at a project that wasn't currently in a D1 or D2 district, but this is in a proposed D1 or D2 district. The following, or the final zoning parameter that I'll mention is height. And there is currently no intersection in the ordinance for D1 and First Street. You won't find that combination currently, and therefore there is none to report. In the D2 First Street, the maximum height is 60 feet. Other character areas in D1 There's a range. You'll find maximum height. The tallest would be 180 feet, and the shortest would be about 120. And that about covers our cursory zoning review. Oh, and you mentioned parking. So that about covers our cursory zoning review. The City of Ann Arbor in the Unified Development Code, we require no minimum parking for any zoning district, any land use for anywhere or anything. You are, however, free to provide parking. The intention of that ordinance change, which was done about 2 years ago, was for parking to be right-sized, meaning the city and the ordinance will not dictate how much parking you need. You can propose the right amount of parking that is needed. Outside of the downtown, we have some anecdotal evidence from some developers that maybe half a space or 0.6 spaces is about the amount of parking that they demand that they see for multifamily outside of the downtown. We don't have data on it, but our position is that it is more appropriate for the developer to say how much parking that they need, rather than the city arbitrarily dictating a number of spaces.
Thank you very much, Alexis. I guess my one question on the follow-up on the parking is, can you remind us what the current ratio is for parking to number of units in the plan?
I think it's around 1-to-1, but how about we can have the design team confirm that?
And perhaps an understanding of why that's the number they believe is appropriate for this project.
Okay, yeah, I'll refer that to them.
I can answer that, Alexis. So the parking target that we're going for is 0.2 by the bed for the residential portion. So, and then, excuse me, the remaining parking that's in there is reserved for the commercial space. And right now, the vision for the commercial space is a grocer. And we're trying to remain as flexible as possible with that space and potential requirements so that we can keep that option open and bring that grocer into the downtown area that can help serve all the community. So we're trying to not pin ourselves into a corner while we work through the planning with that potential tenant.
And just so I'm clear, how does the 0.2 per bed translate in number of spaces per unit? I'm assuming there are lots of 5 or 6 bed units in here, and that makes that number seem small, but it all. So how does that?
Yeah, Matt, do you have that number in front of you?
I'm looking it up right now.
We have recently, as a result of the change that you see up on the screen, the total size of the project is going to be reduced down to approximately 1,200 bedrooms. So I think about a 20% decrease in the overall size of the project. So Matt's just going to check the corresponding parking spaces for that revised count.
Yeah, we're currently with that at 0.6 per dwelling unit.
Thank you.
Alexis, if I understand this proposal correctly, is that this building, this is based on a change in the zoning for this property to D1?
Well, they will be requesting a change in zoning to D1. They have always contemplated a zoning change of some sort. When they first were working on this project, they were thinking of requesting a planned unit development zoning designation. And that has more recently changed. They intend to request a petition for rezoning to D1. But I will say that a change in zoning has always been part of this. The current all of these current concepts, all of these concepts will require some sort of upzoning.
So it would appear that I'm sorry, Jeff, were you done? I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your train of
I have
thought.
more for later, but I just wanted to confirm that part, but go ahead, Bill.
It would appear that the only way this project could be built is either through a PUD or a D1. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct. Now, if it's made smaller, depending on how much smaller, maybe another residential or D district or commercial district could also be contemplated, but this could not be achieved under the current R4C zoning.
Well, I understand if it were scaled back, it could be D2 or something else. So just to get the ground rules, as I understood what was laid out, we are to evaluate this based on the assumption that it could be, that it will be rezoned either PUD or D1 into this kind of density. Is that correct?
That is correct. I mentioned in the staff report that it's really tempting to comment about what zoning district should it be or should it not be. It's my opinion as staff that I think that the design review board can provide value that sort of no matter how many bedrooms are in there, and maybe no matter how many bedrooms, but how are they approaching articulation? How are they approaching setback or facade variation? And that because some of those comments are universal, whether this would be 12 stories or 6 stories, those would be universal. But I believe there's value in the board just commenting on the design, and then it would be up to planning commission and council whether the D1 or some other D1 is approved or not approved or some other district.
Wendy?
Yes. So with all due respect to staff, I don't believe that we can review this as a D1 and make reasonable comments when the scale is inappropriate to the area. This is, if anything, an interface zone, which would be D2. The First Street character area was not ever intended to be overlaid with D1. It was designed to address the lower scale development south of the downtown core. The more industrial, blocky type of development that is interspersed with lower scale buildings. So in my mind, that is kind of front and center, that this building is out of scale with its surroundings. So it can be a beautiful design if they choose, but the context is inappropriate. So I'll just say that and let you all weigh in on the design.
I would just say I feel that's a very valid comment. I'm not offended in any way. As you may tell, we also struggle with how to approach it. I do think that we can somewhat separate scale versus some of the materials and just overall architectural style. I think, for example, that a kind of industrial look may be appropriate for this block if it's going to be in the First Street character area. But beyond that, but there's a lot of components to the design review, and definitely some of them require some assumptions, and you can certainly disagree with some assumptions. I take your comment with all the respect that you intended. Now I'm gonna butt out.
Thank you. Others?
Or but I may have to jump off and get on a phone connection in a little bit. So let me spew out a few things. I think there was a thing in the staff comments about Stowe, which I assume they're talking about the factory built drive it panels. Is it correct? I seem to recall that in our design guidelines, we nixed the use of a drive it type material. Is that correct?
Any type of those types of materials are supposed to be accent only.
Okay. I don't personally have any great disagreement with the use of that. I've used it on some of my own buildings, but if that is something that's considered to be overly used here, that could be taken into account. I take it. On this, I guess it's the the entry side is at the fifth that has the drive-in, drive-out. Is that on the fifth side? You bring that
Yes.
slide up.
Yeah, sure.
That is on the fifth side, Bill.
Yeah, that's the main drop off delivery for the residences.
So that would work. One issue which you have just inherent in the site is it's a fairly steep slope going down. And I just wanted to look again and have you comment on how the fact that you're coming in, having to curve around and come out at another level. And ancillary to that is, remind me on both 4th and 5th, is there allowed on-street parking currently? I don't remember.
On part of Fifth, not all of Fifth, and on just about all of Fourth.
Okay, thank you. But could you comment more about that entry exit and the fact that it's a one-way south? I could see backups if that is used for drop off for folks in turnover times. It would back up Packard, I think.
Look at a floor plan. So the general idea here and intention is that, so again, if you're making your way southbound on Fifth, pulling into the drop-off zone, there are a couple of opportunities for either a pull-in via this curb cut adjacent to the lobby. The idea of this would only be for very quick drop-off and pickup. Otherwise, the parking spaces within this space in this zone here are intended for either future residents that are coming for tours or for food delivery, your pizza drivers, etc. They're intended to be able to park within this space under the building versus just queuing up. So there's ability for semi-permanent parking if something were to take 5-10 minutes to drop off a pizza and you couldn't find the person that was coming down to look for it, for instance. So the idea would be that they'd be able to park temporarily within the zone rather than backing up in a line style queue.
And that Fifth Avenue one-way south, you've just reminded me, most of both sides have on-street parking. Is that what?
No, the parking on the west side of Fifth is north of the northern driveway, and then there's a no parking zone south of that. And on the east side of Fifth, the no parking zone starts about that middle driveway.
Okay. I was trying to contain my observations to what does pertain to this and could, if this were scaled back to say D2 or something. So that's all the comments I have right now.
Thanks, Bill. Lori?
Yeah, I am curious, are the renderings you're showing in the presentation, aside from the one that was previous and current, are those all based on the current design or are those from the previous design?
So everything that was submitted was the design that we had after we incorporated the Planning Commission's design directions, but before we pivoted to the D1 because the zoning hadn't changed at that time.
Yeah, my question is not what was submitted, but what we're seeing on the screen today. Is that's different than what we have in our packet, or it's the same?
It's the same.
So we just have the one view of how you've modified.
Correct. And I can maybe, if it's helpful, so the general sentiment of the design, if we kind of go back to so this is the previous rendering. This is the one that's in your packet, and it's the one that's been presented today. The overall kind of storytelling in terms of materiality and general kind of scale of materials is primarily the same. The larger portion is just the reduction of stories along. If we go to this section here, really what it is this larger L portion here. This was reduced down to the more typical lower scale grade, which is 7 to 6 stories. So overall, the overarching design has not changed drastically aside from that, and then the podium condition where we expressed a brick condition all the way up to 2 stories on the podium and then a 5-foot step back in order to accommodate the character overlay requirement.
Okay, if you could return to slide 19.
Yeah.
I can see the, you know, the two-story base that you're expanding from the building. I think the elegance of the curtain wall coming up to that kind of gold canopy is much nicer than introducing brick above it and below it. And so you know, if there's a way to extend that, even if there has to be some transparency and some opacity, because of internal uses there, I just think the kind of the partie of the folded plane and it kind of enclosing this kind of special moment on the building really gets diminished from that. And I think in some ways, I personally would like to see that move more clearly articulated around the building. I think it feels like a very different building when you move just to the left of this. It starts, the first two floors take on a very traditional character, which it's neither here nor there to me, but I don't get that they're kind of, you know, what parts of the language and, you know, how are you determining where those live and where they don't? So some thread that ties them together or more intentionally makes them distinct. You know, if you're really trying to express that it's several, you know, this idea that it's a series of different buildings in terms of how the color changes are articulated, how is that maybe a gesture that gets down to the lower floors? It just feels a bit unresolved to the west of that bigger tower.
Yeah, I can address a couple of those. I tend to like the comment about the brick material, maybe muddying what is this sort of folded framed element. Generally, that gold folded frame element that you see both at this entry condition on the corner of Madison and Fifth, and then again at the entry point on Packard and Fifth. That material is really only utilized when it's signifying an entry to the residential portion of the building. So whether it's either amenity space or a lobby space, so it's a signifier of entry and ingress and egress to the residence. But I really like the comment about the non-brick material, and then I think we can probably explore a couple options to create a little bit more unity between the base condition and then the building above, so that it doesn't feel maybe disjointed when it transitions between those elements.
Thank you. It does show up at the grocer as well. Is that what, are you counting that in your resident entry zones?
So this, the proposed new design, we one of the things that we looked at doing in terms of just clarity was this folded element only happens on this corner, and then you can kind of see it peeking out over here, only happens over at the residential entry. The grocer retail component is maintaining this more kind of traditional vertical pilaster with the large storefront windows.
Okay.
And the latter, again, a tip to the First Street character area.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like there was a level of cohesiveness at the ground plane that maybe got lost a little bit in some of those changes. A couple other questions. You mentioned stormwater management. How are you addressing that in the design?
Well, currently there's no stormwater management on the site at all. And so we will be putting underground infiltration chambers at a couple of locations to capture all of the hard surface runoff and provide infiltration opportunities. The soils, once you get down 3 or 4 feet, are very sandy and ideal for, you know, infiltration. So the idea is to capture everything that would have run off the site now and keep it on site, directed into the infiltration chambers, and let it go into the soil.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't seeing that on the plans.
So, question about massing, just thinking of what's near this proposed project. What south of Packard and east of the railroad track, are there any current or proposed projects that are more than 6 or 7 stories tall or high, whatever you want to call it?
Well, we know, Bill, we know that the new residence hall that's under construction along Hill Street will have portions that are 6 stories because they've released the architectural renderings for that phase of the new residential construction. We know they've acquired the 2 blocks north of that, some of which was old Fingerly property, some was acquired recently. There was articles in the paper about Regent Weiser, putting those together. But we don't know because they haven't released drawings yet as to what their plans are for that site. But in general, if you look at the project that was built on the old Freeze building site, it's very much akin to what they've released here. That kind of.
But you just made my point. I made a cutoff at 6 or 7 stories. I'm familiar with Main and Madison and the Yard and roughly the height of the new proposed. What's being proposed on this site is much taller than the 6 or 7 stories. That's what I was trying to get at. Is there anything else other than you get up at the corner of Packard and Main? Of course, you have the standard, they call the standard, but even the part that's close to Packard is only 6 or 7 stories. The much taller is up in what was originally part of the D1.
The Packard side of South Quad is 10 stories. I don't think people ever really notice that, but there's 10 stories of exposed building on the Packard side of South Quad. So that's the tallest, I would say, that's closest.
Which project are you talking about, Brad?
South Quad, University South Quad.
Oh yeah, but that isn't real close, right?
It's pretty
I'm trying to think of something with, is it? I'm just drawing a blank. I was trying to think of anything visually in that within eyesight, just trying to get an idea of the massing comparison. That's all. Just trying to form an opinion. That's all I needed to know.
Thank you, Bill. Tamara?
Mr. Chair, I just want to remind the board that we do have another petition today. So that's just a reminder.
Thank you.
All right.
But I do want to give an opportunity for all the board members to speak up for both projects. So I don't know how late we'll be here, but buckle up. Tamara?
Hi, thank you. Hopefully, can you hear me okay? We're parked in a good cell zone. Okay. So I just want to start by saying that I agree with actually a lot of the comments that were made by the public, and also Wendy's comments about the inappropriateness of this size of a building in this area. And, the size of it at the north end seems to be much more appropriate, and I think is the D2 zoning there, if I'm right. So it's just way out of scale to the context. We always say to take stock of the area that you're looking at, and in the description it says you've taken stock, but the design definitely doesn't reflect that at all. There was a comment in the staff report about I'm paraphrasing, but it's something about respecting the historic platted rhythm of that block, which has been there for many years, and it's just obliterated it. There's nothing left of that. I guess this goes with most development. It's disturbing to me that is a fairly treed block, and it's all been taken out. I'm very happy to see that they're proposing geothermal and solar. I'm curious about how much that solar is actually going to take care of the power there. It doesn't look like a lot, although it may be just a placeholder at this point. I'm sure you're going to get farther into that. I really think about these buildings. I think about not what they're looking like now, but what are they going to look like in 30 years and 40 years? How does this enhance Ann Arbor? What kind of character does this add? There's a lot of terms used as, you know, a muted, simple design. Well, it's, how would you describe this in, to tell somebody about this building? There's nothing to describe. There's no character to it. And I think that is what makes a building special, that there's something about it that you can describe, that you can comment on, that you can notice when you're walking by and enjoy it. And this is just, so even if this is just a D2, like this picture here, even if it was all kept at 6 stories, this is not what I want to see in Ann Arbor, personally. I think, you know, that Ann Arbor's got much more color than this. There's more brick color. I know you don't want to just mimic it, but you know, even that little bit of yellow bands or gold bands you brought in really help. If I think about the taller piece as if it was in downtown, sort of taking it out of context here, but I think that what you've done with the windows, I like the, you know, the little bit of gold and adding to that texture and the horizontal banding. You know, I think big buildings, you know, they're big and there's a lot of windows. So I think that's done well there. But again, it's just not, I just feel it's way too large for this context. I think that is all my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. John?
Yes, and I would agree with Tamara and Wendy that I'm a representative of the Art Commission. I'm not a designer, developer, so I defer much of that to my colleagues on the board. However, it does seem out of place, and it particularly seems inconsistent with the material and the design of the new quad that's going in, which is going to be right next door. So this is a new building. We need the housing, but I think I agree with Tamara that it can be done much better, and I'm sure that the designers on staff are capable of doing that. The downsizing really helped a bit with the massing, but it still stands in stark contrast to what is there and what is planned for there. Additionally, and I think that's what the staff is really getting at, that talks about compatibility with surroundings and not benefiting the actual setting. That the podium effect, I think, helps, but I also want to make a comment about the pedestrian experience. It appears as though that there's just going to be one retail business within that entire block, and I saw the one place that the bike storage is right out next to the sidewalk. I'm not so sure that really enhances the pedestrian experience. And I don't know what the others plan. What I can appears to be is not much transparency and a lot of opacity for that. The grocery store, great. A lot of people, you know, coming in there, and I think that can help. I agree with Tamara regarding the solar, that it doesn't appear as though there is much solar on the building, and if it's a placeholder, great. I would encourage the designer to really load up on solar and on live roofs if they can. That will help some of the stormwater mitigation. I have a question about public art. my duty is to engage developers in that. So the question, I guess, to Matt or to Brad is, have you considered public art, and where would that go in your project? And I have another question. Is this going to be an all-electric building, or are you going to include gas? I think the city wants to minimize as much gas as we possibly can. So could you address the public art and then possibly the electric?
Yeah, I can answer that for you, John. I think we'd like to explore, an opportunity for public art. A lot of times where we have designs that lend themselves to murals or artworks, we like to incorporate those. I don't know if we have that sort of opportunity here or an appropriate place, but I think we would like to explore a potential for something more appropriate to this location and property. And then
just to add on to that really quickly, Ryan, just as a part of the new design, you can kind of see it a little bit in this diagram. I apologize, we don't have a great image, but you can even see the small little colored outline kind of there. Is we were thinking that this would be a really nice canvas for some public art. If you can kind of see, we have a hint of a mural kind of along that wall there. So an opportunity in that location. Go ahead, Ryan.
And then with regards to all electric, we're still in the process, the very early stages of what the building loads are going to be and what the feasibility of that is. We were able to achieve that on our recent project that just broke ground over on Forest Avenue on the other side of the campus. So we have seen how it can work. We've also seen the challenges that are associated with that. And so we're just getting into the early planning stages of that.
Let me just make a comment regarding the murals. You might want to think beyond murals. We have a lot of murals in town. They're great. I would encourage you to think material-wise as not just painting murals, but high-pressure laminates, as well as mosaics and other kinds of design material. But you also have some in some courtyards, and that a rotating sculpture garden, however small it could be, would really be attractive to the creative community. So just as some food for thought. But I hope the comments, we need housing. I'm glad that you're offering housing. I hope that you hear us, that we just ask you to up your game a little bit and still make money. And we think you can, because it sounds like you've got a real creative team. So kudos to you. And I look forward to seeing the revisions as they occur.
Thank you, John. We haven't heard from you, Dick.
Yeah, I usually pipe off early, so I decided not to this time. This site is so critical as a connection between downtown and Central Campus and West Quad to the athletic campus. And now that the university is developing the old Fingerly site, it'll be pretty much a continuous chain of projects. And so this site is really strategic, really, really important. Will be bordered by university projects to the north and south. And so I can understand why you might take the point of view of not paying any attention to the scale of the former single family residents in the area, because you're transitioning to something else. But I think you have pushed that to the extreme, and the density and the design of the building seems to be more driven by maximizing bed counts than trying to provide an experience for pedestrians and residents and drivers and people in town. It's really appears to me to be an unfriendly experience walking south on either 4th or 5th next to this building. There's just no visual relief that I'm seeing at all, as opposed to the very porous existing. And again, that's a transitional site, so we're going to lose some of that porosity. But when you compare this to the photograph that Brad showed of the university project that is going to be developed in the next block, they're just worlds apart. And this is just a very weak link to that expanding and more unified campus that the university is going for. So I'm really, really disappointed by the attention to bed counts as opposed to attention to design. And I got to point at the developer, I believe, because I think John is probably right. You have real capable designers, and I just would encourage you to investigate the experience of walking around the perimeter of this building and of the residents who are going to live across the street and look at this building. And it's nice that the bed count has been reduced, as I understand it, from 1,500 beds to 1,200. The 20 houses that are being replaced, I don't know, may each have 5 units. So we're replacing 100, maybe 150 beds with 1,200 beds. And that's a huge character change. And it's going to be a busy site. There'll be lots of DoorDashes dashing in and out. And it as a pedestrian will be a site where you just accelerate your walk and try to get past it and get down to the Fingerly site and the athletic campus, or get up the hill to the central campus. And I don't agree with the comments that as the site falls, I think maybe about 30 feet from north to south down 4th and 5th, I don't think that change in elevation has been handled very elegantly yet. I think there's a lot more thought you could give to that. I would like to see more setbacks, more interest, more focal points. I think calling this minimalist design is a misnomer by far. That minimalist design takes a lot more thought, and I think that that's a misnomer. I also don't like the statement that the color reflects the Michigan palette. If you've ever been here in the fall or seen any of our thousands of lakes and hundreds of thousands of acres of green trees, this does not reflect the Michigan color palette. The EFS system is something that I personally have a problem with. Growing ivy on the north side of the parking structure won't work. It'll get no sunshine. So I just encourage you to look more closely at a process that might be undertaken by the university on adjacent sites, in the careful amount of design and the extensive amount of thought being put into something, and shift your focus from bed counts. I would like to add, I'm the guy who usually cites specific design guidelines, and I won't go through them, but I'm just going to give you the numbers that you could take a look at, because I think they might provide you some inspiration. A1.1, A1.3, A1.6, B1.1, B1.2, C1.1, C2.1, and C3.3. Thanks.
Thank you, Dick. A few comments that I wanted to make are, first of all, I'm definitely against the change in zoning on this property to D1. it distresses me that we're essentially wiping out an entire neighborhood to build a project like this. And when the city entertained higher densities downtown, it was really, I think, with some intention and certainly mine, that we would see some revitalization of some of these residential, these single family residential and two family residential areas. And this does nothing other than wipe one out. And that bothers me a great deal. It almost feels like the development team brought us the worst example of design that they could, so that anything that happens from here is going to look like an improvement. I feel like it's buildings like this that caused the design review board to be formed in the first place, to prevent this from happening. I agree with the comment that the nearby architecture that the university is developing is appealing. It suits the scale of a university town, which, for better or for worse, I don't want to lose that nomenclature. And so, along with the other comments that other people have made, I hope that you'll take some of this back and take another cut at this. Does anybody else have anything they want to include? All right, thank you for this. I think
Chair Perkins?
Yes.
If the discussion is wrapped up, I did just want to take one moment to mention about the next steps and further ways to engage.
Yes, please.
All right, calling up my notes, 1 second. So for anyone particularly interested, the process is we start with the design review board, as we are doing tonight. Then this project team will formally submit a rezoning petition and a site plan petition. Those will go to the planning commission for a public hearing, and the planning commission will publish a public hearing notice and send out notices to everyone within 300 feet of the site. After the planning commission makes their recommendation, they are a recommending body. The project will move to city council, and they'll actually go twice, once for a first reading of the zoning and then a public hearing. So there'll be 2 more public hearings coming up. One is in front of the design review. Nope. One is in front of the planning commission for a recommendation body, and then a final public hearing in front of city council for approval. For ways to keep involved, you can sign up for our subscription email service. Our Gov Delivery is the brand name, and you'll get notices of agendas for the planning commission. Look for scheduling at the planning commission. This project will move on to city council. We don't run individual mailing lists, but our official mailing list is the Gov Delivery service for anyone who wants more information than simply the public hearing postcards.
Thank you, Alexis. All right, let us move on the agenda to 1208 South University.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Would it be okay for Planner DeLeo to summarize the comments for her item for DRB's consideration at this time so that she can exit the meeting?
Yes, and it's fresh in our mind, so please do.
Yeah. Okay. I've been taking notes, so pardon my grammar or English, but I did hear comments about working on the level of cohesiveness in the ground plane, and about how the various components are expressed between residential and commercial. I heard a lot of comments about massing, and that the massing is too tall. And also heard a lot of comments that I would characterize as the material choices. And there seems to be the board is recommending a more traditional academic style. No, all right, I'm seeing a head nod.
I think Alexis, that was more in the keeping of the scale of the university buildings.
Okay.
And the height of the university buildings and the massing of the university buildings as opposed to the actual architecture.
Thank you, then. Thank you. I had also heard about several comments about the pedestrian experience from the sidewalk, and the difference between the current level of porosity between the single family rhythm and this singular building rhythm. Specific to materials, the EFIS system was commented about not appropriate. Also taking a more careful look at material choice, including plantings, which may not be appropriate. So I think that captures all of the high level comments, but please let me know if I have not. I will also be writing this up to be a little more articulate.
I have some other takeaways that I heard that I might add to what you just mentioned, Planner DeLeo, which was a discouragement of reliance on using too much of the drive-it style, some type of transition plan or better time together of lower floors and towers, which can feel disjointed at times. Several comments about scale and height, which you mentioned. In general, concerns that the building style is presented lacks defining character or distinction for Ann Arbor, and a preference for more color or perhaps use of materials that are found in the area like brick. Appreciation of the gold banding and suggestion to expand on that type of detail. And then an encouragement to consider sculptures and other artwork in courtyards and in other areas. There were a series of design guidelines that Board Member Mitchell suggested. And those are the additional things that I had to add.
Yeah, I did make note, and I think I have those design guidelines mentioned accurately.
Anything we've missed?
One thing that I wanted to inject is with regard to the parking, it's really hard for us as a board to evaluate parking when we don't have any way to know on what basis did they choose the number of spaces that I mean, there was some discussion about it, but it's not clear in my mind that they need the number of spaces that they're including. And therefore, what is the correct amount? So it would be nice going forward for future projects if we had some kind of guidelines. The idea that it's left up to the developer to decide doesn't leave us with any way to evaluate what they're proposing. So some mention should be part of that in here since they are proposing so much parking on the site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeLeo.
Thank you, Alexis. So now we can move on to 1208 South University Street. And the thank you to the developers for joining us. So make your presentation, please.
I have to jump off. I'll try to get back in by phone, but good work so far. Thank you.
All right, Bill. Hope you get back.
Oh, I was hoping to get the last four of their phone number or the last three so that I can promote them, but I guess they'll be a spectator.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? It's John.
Yes, John.
Great. Well, I'll run away, and if we need to pull anybody else in, I'll be more than happy to let you know. My name is John Majewski with Majewski Architects, and we're the architect for this project. And I'm going to walk you through it today. And I know you've been through a lot so far, so I'll try to keep it relatively brief and then let you guys ask any specific questions. But I do want to just clarify that we've been through 2 citizen participation meetings. One was lightly attended and one was extremely heavily attended. And the extremely heavily attended one was basically talking a lot about Pinball Pete's. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the developer has offered to work with Pinball Pete's and the current landowner to help find a solution to relocate them or to accommodate them within the project. So that's going to be an ongoing process for us, and we'll continue to do that. So some of the things I'll show you today are outcomes of that. Some are things that have come from the citizen participation, some have come from staff interaction, and some have just come from things that naturally evolve, like trash. But today, the project developer is Landmark Properties. Scott is on as well with Midwestern if we need anything from him. And Luke Bonner has been also helping us out as we've been going through this. Let's see, I can't get my thing to advance. There we go. The project itself, I think just overall, it's very important to start out and get everybody situated with the massing. But the building that would be removed is often referred to as the Ann Arbor Galleria or the Galleria. And it is basically the building that is located between the two buildings that sit there today currently. One is being a bar, both of them are basically bars. And we're not taking those buildings down. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that the Brown Jug and the Blue Leprechaun are kind of the bookends for our project, and they are staying right where they are. This first image, I think, is just very helpful to help you understand this part of the community has really changed, and it's really interesting to see how the massing has gone up and how much larger it is than it has been in the past 10 years, and it's just slowly growing. And I think there's more to come based on things that aren't even in this picture. And I'm sure there'll be things that come in different scales from the university itself as well. The project we're proposing, although it is going to be taller under the new zoning in D1, which will allow us to do the bonus to go from 150 feet in height to 195 feet, is represented by what you see here today. But interestingly enough, it doesn't quite seem like it's out of character, even though we'll be the first one to go to that new higher threshold of height. So with that, I'll walk you through the project. And I think it's just important first to kind of talk through the materials and the materiality of the building. The scale and the way the building was set up kind of came out of both the zoning requirements, which require a base, and a great deal out of some of the comments that we received from some of the community members. And the community members were really looking for, I think, some of the things that we typically see from plan commissions and design review boards, and that is that they wanted to see a base. They wanted that base of the building to reflect the neighborhood and the character that's there. They asked us to have as much retail as possible. And then they wanted effectively a shaft or some way to see that base articulated from the rest of the building. And then the ability to have some portion of the building have somewhat of a top to it. And so we've tried to do that. Obviously, the base is a requirement. We're doing a 3-story base. We're transitioning from the Brown Jug over to the Blue Leprechaun. One is a 1-story plus building. One is a 2-story plus building. We're situating the building back from the 1-story building and the 2-story building on either side with a 1-story element, and then you'll transition to our 3-story brick element. There's a central element that becomes the entry for the project, slightly articulated up. There's somewhat of these very minimal, but yet somewhat buttressed elements that definitely are picking up on a historic character, but are trying to create a horizontal rhythm across the building to articulate it and to break it into effectively 3 bays on one side and 4 bays on the other side. The building is not intended to be symmetrical. We didn't set out to try to do that. We've taken an opportunity then to push the building back further with a dark band as you go above, so there's a clear articulation with the base of the building. And then it really softens up and it lightens as a shaft as it goes up the building. And the dark band that's pushed back and the darker elements that you see are called out as charcoal stow panels. Those are metal panels, so I just want to clarify that. They are part of the stow system, but they are metal panel. And then as we go up where you'll see the balcony elements, the balconies at the recess of the balcony has a rib stow element. So that allows us to get an articulation or a dimension to a material that's pushed back in a relatively safe area because it's within somebody's balcony. And so that's pushed back, and that creates this kind of ripped element that goes up the building, and the balconies break it up itself. And then in between that, on the very strong element on the corner, to kind of say that we're reflecting and looking at the campus, that does happen to be a larger living room space as we go up into one of the units. That curtain wall glass system runs up the rest of the verticality of the building all the way to the top to create somewhat of an accentuation on the campus side of the project. And obviously, as a living room, it's really nice that that can have a reflection and have the ability to look out at that element. The rest of the building itself, when you see the horizontal elements, those are actually channels. On the glass part, there'll be a metal channel recessed into the glass. Although it looks like it sticks out, it's actually recessed into the glass itself. And then when you see it go through the light gray material, that's actually a recess again, and that is a metal element that goes horizontally. When we get up to the very top of the building and this lighter gray element, we are proposing to actually use the Stowe system that is still the panelized system, but we have 3 levels of detail. I'm trying to run these horizontal elements coming across each of those, I'll call it salmon colored bands, or it's really intended to be our brick, which is picking up on sandstone. So we're trying to be reflective of some of the brick color, but we don't want to be just picking up and doing the classical terracotta. So we're picking up on some of the salmon and terracotta and other colors that we see. And we're using this Glengarry brick, which is actually called Mason Gold, although it doesn't look gold at all. And the brick on the base of the building will have a colored mortar so that the brick doesn't jump out, but creates a very nice even tone. And we'll continue that color up as you go through the building. That's why you're seeing those elements that run through it. That lighter gray area where we really would like to stick with the standard Stowe panel system is that I can achieve 3 levels with those panels. I can have the panels, but I can actually have 4 levels. The windows are the 4th pushed back. The infill of the light gray that you would see in an area running vertical like here will actually be pushed back again. And then the bands, which it's hard to see, these vertical bands and these horizontal bands have 2 subtle levels to them so that I get that pilaster to kind of be built out. And then when you get to the very top of the building, you can see that it's almost a little finnel that really pushes itself up at the top of the building to just give us a very subtle, but some relationship to saying the building is ending here and this is the top. As we'll go around the building, especially on the right side, you'll see the glass, because that's where the amenity element is, that is actually wrapped around with this glass kind of curtain wall, window wall system at the very top of the building. And then on the areas that are set back from the front facade, and I'll show you more about that, but just walking you through the materials, we are proposing to actually use the Stowe cast brick, where I can actually pick up on the same color and mortar of the real brick and still be able to get the energy benefits of this Stowe cast brick system. I will tell you that I am honestly telling you, I thought I'd be the last person saying that I'd recommend a product like this, but we've had great success with it, especially in an instance like this, where the 2 materials are actually set back from each other, the real brick at the base and the cast brick at the upper portion. We've tried to use thin brick as something that's adhered to the wall so that we can still get the insulation value. And we've found in the Midwest, we've gone through testing, it doesn't work. The thin brick will pop off. It's not suitable for a high rise. You might be able to get away with it on a 1 or a 2-story building. But we've been through a lot of testing groups with this. And it was actually something that we went through when we looked at, was that a possibility to do for a material on the standard over on Packard, which was mentioned earlier, Packard in Maine. So we are promoting the idea of using the Stowe cast brick system, and then that will allow us to get the look and the texture. The infill on that side between the middle will also be this charcoal Stowe metal panel. And now that kind of wraps you around. We'll have storefront at the bottom of the building, windows that will be black, clear, low E glass. The railings are intended to basically be a painted aluminum railing that will wrap around. And the edge of the balcony itself will be that similar metal band that's like a C channel that will wrap around and allow that little colored element and little bit of detail to run through the building as we go through it. Next, I want to jump into something that's really boring, but it's important for the project, and that's how the project works. We can't have any access off of University. Nobody would want it. Nobody would suggest it, so we're not. We do need to get trash. So initially, the idea with trash was to bring it into the building, go through the process of having the trash truck drive in, lift the building up appropriately, allow that trash truck just enough movement to be able to go in, back up, in this case over to the left here, and then leave the building. That's what's in your packet. But since then, we've been able to work with Public Works, and we've had discussions with the DDA, and we're trying to work through an alternative solution. One of the reasons is this has a terrible impact when we do this, not only on the front of the building because of where the retail, how it would impact the retail. And mainly that's because I have to get all the way up to where I can make this T maneuver before I could pull the truck in or out. So even if I wanted to put this 2-story trash area somewhere else, I can't do it. I just can't get it to work. So the concept here is the truck has to pull in, turn around within our property and leave. And I'm hoping that we've gotten the Public Works Department to consider an alternative I'm going to show you now. This has a big impact if we were to do it on the second floor. I've got this giant 2-story hole in my building. Basically for trash that I can work it out. It's just very awkward and weird. So that's in your set. But what we're going to propose to do, and we think we have some support, but it's got to go through all the proper channels, is to increase our retail and lobby, which is still a little bit of a work in progress, to maximize as much retail as we possibly can get and allow the trash to actually be picked up by going across this plaza area at the back. An interesting aspect about this project is the alley is not a public alley. We do have to get city property, but we will have to get permission from the city to allow us to drive back and forth. I can't imagine that won't be granted, but nothing's a guarantee. What we've talked about is looking at other ways of bringing the trash in, but the conclusion was this might be the best. Simply store the trash inside the building, take it out when it's required, and allow the trash truck to pick it up. And they appear to be willing to make this maneuver to then leave the site. That's a work in progress.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but you are over 10 minutes for your presentation. Is there anything critical you'd like to share with the board?
I think
that they can enter into discussion?
No, I think mainly I just wanted to get through this aspect of why the building plans have changed subtly. It just has a very minimal impact on the rear garage doors with what we're promoting. And under this concept, we would have parking potentially on the first floor and the second floor, but we're currently working with the DDA to see if we can get the number of parking spaces needed in the current parking garage. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
All right, thank you, John. All right, so comment from board members? Wendy, please.
Yeah, I have a question, John. So you said there were 2 citizen participation meetings. Have you made any changes to the design as a result of those comments?
We have. The first was that they asked for this articulation and the breaking up of the facade. So that's why you're seeing the balconies and the rib stow elements running vertical. We were asked not to let those go all the way through the top, but to actually stop them. So that's why you see the top actually has a horizontal gray difference. We were asked to do something that had that little bit of a verticality element. So I'm talking about those pilasters that are popping up to give the building some 3-dimension. We were asked to look, initially we had a larger massing on the corner, and we were asked to scale that back and look at an articulation where you see the vertical dark metal panel breaking that up. And we were asked to actually, which we haven't shown yet, but on the one side on the right, basically right next to the brown jug, we were actually asked to create an entry for the bikes that's dedicated for the bikes, and everybody appreciated that you could actually bring your bike in right from the street and there was not some convoluted way to get through. And we were asked to see if we could find a better solution to get the trash out of the building. And then obviously Pinball Pete's.
Thank you.
One of the things that always says residential to me is the inclusion of balconies on these sorts of tall buildings. And I really appreciate the way you've added them to the building, John. But my question is, they only occur on the north side of the building, which if I were in the building, I'd want to be anywhere but on the north side. Is there any opportunity to incorporate balconies on some of the other exposures?
Yes, there are. And they actually do currently wrap around. You can see on the plan I've got up right now, we have one here, we have two in this location, one in this location, one in this location, and one in this location. And we are looking at adding one right in this location.
Right. Thank you. And then the other thing that I was a bit concerned about, although it intrigues me, is if you go to the level 3 plan and up, I don't know how to describe this. I'm going to call it a crotch area of the building. There's this, it's on the east side, it's sort of east and facing south. Yeah, that area. It's kind of an interesting space because it's like this tall silo of interior exposure. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you envision that space working?
Yeah, and I think your comment is right on par and totally understand it. But I would tell you, this has actually gotten to be twice as big as where it started. Because when we did something like this on the hub on Huron, we had much smaller ones, which were successful, but they were small. What they were missing is the one piece that's open. So I think what really made a big difference was we've been able to open up this side of the building. So it is a courtyard, but it really is open. It only has one balcony within it, which is kind of tucked in. And basically what you'll have is a studio, and one unit looking through into that, where these other two units obviously have corner windows that will wrap around for the project. So, you know, it's one of those tough things in a courtyard situation. You're trying to make it a non-courtyard. And I think we've been successful in doing that. I understand your question. It's a really bizarre shaped piece of property to start with. You know, it's just not a square, which is fun. It gives us something to work with. But it does have to meet certain codes and restrictions for size, and we do meet that. And that's not easy based on the height of the building.
All right, thank you for that. Wendy?
I just wanted to follow up on your comment about balconies, Jeff. Normally I would agree with you, but given the student character of this area, I am actually concerned about balconies, especially at this height, because of parties and what happens when too many people get on balconies. Can you talk about that, John? How to address some of the safety concerns? Are the railings going to be taller, or has that not been an issue of discussion?
No, it's always an issue, but it has not been an issue on these projects. And Landmark is super good about enforcement, and I think that's what makes the difference. If they have anybody acting up, they basically get a warning and then they're out of the building. What we do to help accommodate, though, is we actually lift the height of those railings up to 48 inches, higher than what's required. And at the very top of the building, we actually go up to 5 feet. Now that's more of a glass system, so everybody can appreciate the view, but there it's going up to 5 feet. And that really is predominantly trying to make sure that they never have to deal with that issue. I would also let you know that anywhere we have a balcony, everything is set back from the property line and obviously set back from the street front. But you know, we haven't had that issue on these projects. I think it just has to do with the way that they're managed.
All right, thank you, Wendy. Lori.
Hi, I wanted to just comment that I like some of the details, the kind of C channel reveals are all of that's hard to see in this kind of SketchUp rendering, that those things do come to life when the materials are real and not rendered. And I know we're not seeing all of those in the materials we have. That said, this building is what 80% EFIS basically. All of those different stow systems are more or less the same system, and I'm a little confused. I'm concerned about the quality. I know you've said you've tested it and used it and been satisfied, but I'm definitely concerned, especially when we have a real brick material on the same building as a fake brick trying to be that same real brick. So that concerns me a lot, you know, even just the way the light hits it, the way any sort of difference in color or texture will make it very clear that those aren't the same material. So I'm definitely concerned about how that will actually play out in reality with those two very similar but not the same materials.
Yeah, I think I felt the same way, and we've done it on 2 projects and we've done it in similar applications. This one's even better because usually it's actually been above it on the front facade. In these cases, they're actually located on the back or the rear. And as the main thing that you have to do is you have to find some way to separate it, right? You don't want the two in the same surface coming together. And so I think we've been able to achieve that. And so, you know, it's not inexpensive. I'm going to be honest with you. It's probably less expensive than real brick, but the difference is I'm going to get so much more insulation versus what I'll have to do. And I actually get more unit. There's only so much unit I can fit on this site, even setting FAR aside. That's one of the reasons. So I understand there's a lot of stow, but the stow metal, I could tell you it's anything, any metal panel, you'll never know the difference. It's just well insulated. So I just want to make sure we could do a different metal panel. It just wouldn't make sense because this can all be done in a factory and put together and kind of fit very tightly, you know, like a watch is made. And that's one of the reasons that we really want to do it. I think the main thing that would stand out as a simpler, unified stow system is the lighter gray that you're seeing here.
Okay, thank you. My other comment was on the balconies. I do think that they help the articulation of the building, but I also feel like they feel a little stuck on to what is basically a flat facade, and even pushing them in a foot or two to give a bit of a shadow line or reveal around those and have them be a bit more expressed in the facade, I think would make them stronger as kind of a defining element, and in lieu of all of these materials continuing to like just change but in the same plane. Those are the facades that tend to look the lowest quality and the, you know, the least rich. The last project, there was comparison to some of the University of Michigan buildings. Of course, totally different budgets are applicable in those things, but part of what we love about them is that the design isn't about changing from material 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, but because we're expressing that variety in the facade. And I know you're trying to hit room counts, square footage counts, all of those things, but we lose quality of character when we're pushing those every single facade right out to the edge. So I would just request the consideration for some of those faces to shift in and out just a little bit to give us a little bit more richness of form.
And I think that's our goal. And I think we can achieve that by a little bit of both, by pushing it in and then also taking those light gray vertical elements and helping to accentuate those so they give some depth to the building. I mean, you nailed it. That's what I'm trying to do in a realistic multifamily residential budget. I don't get the budget that the university project does. That's
absolutely
true.
Understood. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Dick.
I wonder if we could hear from Matt Kowalski. I think Matt wrote the staff report. It might have something we're not seeing.
Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon. I guess we're getting towards the evening. Matt Kowalski, obviously, city planner. Well, is there anything in particular you would like to, for me to touch on other than basically, I did one of the comments that was just brought up regarding the stow panels. That was one of my questions as well, is the use of that. I had pointed out in the report is a concern. As you know, the stow ephes type material is only permitted as an accent material. So one of my comments was that we need to learn more about exactly, but however, there's a wide range of stow type panel systems. So again, I think what the applicant is explaining here is a little bit different than a straight ephes panel, but we would need more information on that. That was really one of the sources of our biggest concern regarding the actual design of the building. There are other, again, some minor comments regarding some of the materials, and some of which Mr. Majewski handled today, actually addressed some of those comments regarding like how the glass, the glass corner element was set up, how that was accentuated and things like that, and the banding that we can see on here, but it's not exactly clear, as was pointed out. It's recessed into there. Another one of the main items on here that was kind of mentioned again was the redesign of the solid waste area, which was a comment of ours from staff, as well as various public comments, was that to really increase the retail frontage along the South University street facade, and obviously having that solid waste in there, which is a required feature, it really drove that design and limited that space there. So the applicant, as they stated, has been working a lot. Back and forth with our solid waste reviewers, as well as the DDA, engineering, myself, to try and get some kind of solution to that, which they presented a little bit briefly here today, in order to open up that front, the street level experience, to add hopefully more activity, more retail type uses like that. So that hopefully would go a long way to kind of addressing one of our concerns with the activity on the street level. Again, we kind of handled the materials a little bit. We did request
Matt, can you
Yes.
talk about the zoning change and the height? I think there's reference to both.
Yes, absolutely. So, as was mentioned with the previous project as well, the city council has recently approved code amendments which remove the FAR requirements and only regulate downtown development by height. So now that they were approved last week or so, I believe, so it's not quite active yet, but it will be. And I believe it's the middle of December sometime that those regulations will be in effect. So they obviously, as you can see, if you read my report, the previous standard FAR was 400%, 900 with premiums. They're up to 1200%, a little bit over. But basically that was pretty much the intent of removing FAR regulations in that area. So it will, when this project is submitted, it will comply because there will be no FAR limit. The height is one other thing that we did have a little bit of a question on how they were going to, because again, it was mentioned earlier, but the maximum height limit for this district is 150 feet for the South University character area. They're proposing it's a little over 190 feet, I believe. And but there is the caveat in the code that does allow that with sustainability features and or affordability. So affordable components. Now those components are both defined within our code section. So that was something, we don't have those exact details. I don't think it would be something that would probably drive the design of the building significantly, other than, perhaps some solar panels on the roof. But so I don't know, they may be able to add a little bit more detail on that to what they're thinking. But again, I mean, they obviously have to have an answer for that going forward, but it's not necessarily something that the design would affect. So those are really pretty significant changes that helped bring about this project in that area. That kind of is a brief summary. Did I miss anything, or do you have any other questions kind of on the basics?
Well, I was wondering about the thing you just discussed. To get the maximized FAR, there needs to be a combination of affordable or sustainable.
Yes. Well, no, I'm sorry to correct you, but not for the FAR, but for the height.
Yes.
The FAR is okay, but for the maximum height, they need those bonuses.
Yep. And John Majewski, if there's anything that comes out of those negotiations that has a huge impact on the design. Would you bring it back to us?
Yes, yes, definitely. And we are proposing to put solar panels up on the roof. I think you guys know we've done our best to maximize that on every project, with like the Hoover and Green being the ultimate, where it's literally a whole city block. It can't get much more up there. And it's a combination of what I can fit on the roof versus some of the mechanicals I have to have. We also have on a lower portion of the roof, we have a very nice amenity area up on the top as well. But this will be a sustainable building. Since those rules really were just passed, we're just working through what those elements are going to be right now.
And just so we've beat up the IFAS system, but my feeling about IFAS stems back to when it was a field applied application, you know, the insulation and then a polypropylene mesh and hand applied stucco. And that's not what we're talking about here. These are factory built panels.
Correct. Everything is factory built. It's very crisp and clean, and it comes together. It wouldn't be any different than, let's say, if you did it out of metal. It's just that I get the insulation qualities and I get a budget that I can work within. You know, we were actually asked not to have a brick and metal building. That was one of the other things that came out of our citizen participation. And sometimes I think that's just an overreaction to some of the other things they've seen. But I think it's finding the right balance of not doing too much, but doing enough to break up the materiality of the facade.
It's hard to tell. The sidewalls of the recessed balconies, is that an EFIS system or is that a more durable material?
On the actual balconies itself, that's actually a pre-made metal system.
The sidewalls, the light colored sidewalls.
The light colored sidewalls will actually be part of that EFIS paneled system. So it is part of that. And that'll actually be a pilaster, and it'll be made like a pilaster element. So the pilaster comes out as kind of a U-shaped channel element, just like you think it would be with metal. It has some articulation to it. And then the infill where the windows are set in with yet another panel. And then there's a infill that goes around the windows.
Students might be rough on that.
Yeah, well, we definitely could consider, actually, I can look into see if there's a way to do that, actually framing it with metal.
Thank you. But otherwise, I think it's a well done project and well on its way. I don't have objections.
Thank you.
John?
Yes.
Well, John, I love the building. You know, it's no criticism at all. This is head and shoulders above the standard, and I think above any of the other surrounding buildings. And it's nice that this is the tallest building and it's the nicest building. I really like what you've done to create depth on the walls and on the verticals. You know, if this is minimalism, you've proven to me that minimalism doesn't mean cheap vanilla. So well done. I like the balconies, but I defer to my colleagues regarding the challenges for having balconies. I like the street wall, the three story wall.
I'm sorry, John, we're having trouble hearing you. Could I ask folks who are not speaking to mute their audio, please? That way we can hear Mr. Kotarski clearly. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. All good. Well done. I really appreciate what you've done with Pinball Pete's. You know, I mean, we heard comments earlier about that. It's very popular, and I don't think the outcome could be any better than how you've approached it. You've engaged the community in your project. So well done. Kudos. As I've told the previous developer, I'm the representative of the Art Commission. So I'm interested in how you thought about public art for your building, and whether you found any way of incorporating public art in the project.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for asking that, because I didn't have a chance to get to it. But at the end of the city plaza at the back, which is a plaza that needs a little bit of love, to be honest with you. It's got trees, it's got transformers, but it needs some love. We're proposing that we would do, it's probably about a 19-foot high by about 40-foot wide mural. And we want that to actually be a textured mural, because it's actually a surface level thing, and it could be something where the artist can experience it. And we would intend to work with the Arts Commission to help select that, and let the Arts Commission be the one that selects the artist to do that. I think I'm the architect, so I'm a little biased, but I think the mural that came out on the standard over on Packard really came out quite beautiful. So that process worked out very well. And that's where we're actually proposing to kind of create a bas-relief 3-dimensional mural that goes on that wall.
I like that you mentioned a relief as opposed to sort of a flat painted picture of some sort. And the Art Commission would be more than happy to help in any way we can. We would encourage you to set up a process that engages the community, much like you've done for the other things in regards to the selection, the type, the material for that. We'd be happy to do that. And I'm always pitching sort of a rotating sculpture, even if it's small within the lobby or any other way, to get more of our creative community engaged in your project and exposing their material. I mean, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be giant, but think about it. If it works, we'd be happy. The Art Commission would be happy to help you work through the issues.
Well, I'll be more than happy to go through that with the team. And I think one thing that I just wanted to point out is that we've worked with the DDA. We're actually going to propose to take the parking out in front of the building and expand the sidewalk to the full width.
Right.
The DDA has agreed to that. So that would give us, it's not a public plaza, but it's going to give us a great pedestrian experience, and it might give us an opportunity to do something front and center.
Great, great. Kudos.
Thank you.
Tamara? Are you still driving?
I wasn't supposed to be driving during this meeting, so I apologize for that. Or riding in the car, I should say. And I hope you can hear me, because it looks like the sound's dropped a little bit, so just let me know if there's an issue. Hi, John. I always appreciate seeing your projects. I think I love the way you always engage the citizens, participation meetings early and often, and I don't think many people do that. I think it makes a big difference that we've all seen in your projects. I think, I think done a great job with articulating the facade. I do have questions about just how much is, like you said, there's pilasters. How deep are those pilasters? And then how deep are the windows within those panels? Like, what is the variation? Is it inches or?
It's the reveals will probably be 4 to 5 inches, those horizontal reveals. The pilasters themselves are going to be between 2 to 3 inches where there's the step. And then the windows generally are about another 2 to 3 inches back. So it's significant, but it's really more that it's a series of all these different steps that we're trying to create kind of that texture.
I like the 3 stories or 4 stories at the base. I mean, that is what pedestrians are experiencing mostly. And it looks like that you're using, real brick there. I do also have a concern about the, I should call it fake brick, but the brick stove brick, because it is, I don't know what it looks like, and again, like how the light catches it. Does it, what is it going to look like? So, but I'm glad you're using the real brick, at least down where people could touch and feel it. Is this gonna be all electric building?
It will be all electric with the exception of the generator. It doesn't make sense to do that with diesel. That's just worse for the environment. So the only thing there we would run gas for that. And then we have one gas outdoor fireplace up on the roof, and there's just really no electrical substitution for that.
And I think that last question was, there's a stairwell in the back, and in the plan, it looked like there was no windows into it, but then I think the view you were just showing us a minute ago shows there is windows. Is that? But are there windows in the stairwell?
There are windows in one of the stairwells, and one of them does not.
One of them is interior, right?
Right.
So couldn't have, but yeah, oh, okay, good. I didn't see them on the plan, so it's just. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other of the board members have anything to say? All right, Hank, should we have Matt summarize, or do you want to go to community comments?
Sure, if you don't mind, I can add a little summary.
Right, thanks.
Based on the notes of what we've seen. I mean, that's not a ton to really work on, but we did hear some concerns regarding the balconies at that height, and the height of the balconies, the rails of the balconies, and items concerning surrounding that. Petitioner did have a response about raising the height above what the required code minimum would be. Other design concerns with the lack of a better word, like the fake brick kind of mixing with the real brick, and how that would blend together correctly. It looks like we've got kind of a bad effect, and draw attention to the different material choices, ensure that the choices blend well. Strengthen the balconies and the facade effect. That was another comment that we've got. I know that we have also, again, a little, there were some questions about the EFIS type of system and the stow panel. So I think that those seem to have been addressed a little bit, but again, that will be an item that staff is going to have to follow up on again because of the way our code language is worded. Let's see here. We've got some comments regarding the the mural in that back area. And some, I guess we've got an additional concern regarding, some of the fake brick stone and what it will look like in different lights. Glad you're using brick closer to the street level. That looks to be the major design considerations that we have. Unless I had missed anything, I did actually want to ask one follow-up question, if I could, of the architect, Mr. Majewski, regarding that public art, because since it was a discussed item, how will that be impacted by the solid waste changes? Because that is the area where the solid waste, I think you're working towards putting the solid waste and the dumpster area. And if you could go back to that, I mean, I know it's not like a permanent plan yet. I mean, you're still working through it, but I think, going through there, and then maybe like your floor plan, like, can you comment again, like, is that going to be shielded by the dumpsters since that's that main area there?
Well, I'll be honest with you, the mural itself, we'd rather, and I think that's something we want to work with the Arts Commission on, because I kind of like this challenge of how do we do a bas-relief mural that meets the plaza, addresses the issue of the trash, that it could be as simple as we put bollards in front of it, or it could be that we actually engage it, embrace it somehow. So that's what you're going to see in that area. But to go back to that plan, the dumpsters are all inside. They just have to come out. They have to come out basically twice a week to be picked up. And I think the neighbor building already does have their trash picked up over here. And then currently there's a big holding pen for trash over on the other side. But I think we were encouraged not to try to use that because then you have to go across the alley.
Yep, that was correct. Okay, so that definitely does, that helps. Thank you, because I wasn't quite, and I know that that system is still in flux there, how exactly you're designing that, but the general idea, as I understood it, that it seems like solid waste is amenable to this solution. So so that's good news on that. So that was one of my thoughts. The only other thing I would like to just point out again are the opportunities for the members of the public that we have here, additional opportunities for public feedback, which would be, we've got our Gov delivery service. If nobody listening, if you're not aware of that service, that's where we can send out emails for our planning commission meetings and things like that at DRB. So you can get notified that way. And this will be a plan that will, it will meet the zoning. So it will end up only going to city planning commission for approval if and when it is submitted. So it will not need city council action. And again, email as well, email city planning staff. You can, anybody out there listening, my email address is mkowalski@a2gov.org. You can also get my email through the planning website as well. So those are some ways to continue interest in it. We've received some preliminary interest already from residents. Majority of it is revolving around Pinball Beach. But we look forward to additional comments. So I think that kind of summarizes up what I have. So please let me know if I've missed anything or if you have additional questions.
All right, Matt, thank you. Any feedback for Matt on his report? All right, so we will move on to item G on our agenda, unfinished business. I don't know of any. Hank, do you have anything for us that we need to look at?
I do not. The only thing I would note is the item you reviewed at your last meeting in April, 333 East William, will be presenting to the Planning Commission for approval on December 19th. If you're interested in seeing the result of the work from your last meeting.
Hank, I have a request related to that. Is it possible for you all to send us the planning staff report when these projects go to the Planning Commission so we can kind of see for ourselves what changes might have been made in the interim?
The staff report in advance of can you clarify at what point you are suggesting to be sent?
When everyone else gets access to it. So when it's released to the public the Friday before or whatever, if we can just be added to the CC list. I just feel like, we made comments on that project and now I'm not sure what happened to those comments. So at least if I had the staff report, I could see, how it may have changed.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly pass that request along, and typically we do publish the agenda the end of the week before the meeting. So we anticipate publishing the draft agenda, I'm sorry, not draft agenda, but the agenda for the 19th tomorrow afternoon sometime, and we can distribute it to the DRB.
Thanks. I would appreciate that. I'm sure we can follow up on our own, but it just would be nice to have that closing of the loop.
Yes.
Hank, I had one question for you too. Can you tell us anything about the status of the 2 affordable housing projects that the Housing Commission walked by us, one on the old Y lot and one down in Carytown at Catherine and 4th, I think, and 4th, and down that way?
Yeah, the old Y lot is still under development discussions. That hasn't advanced to, and help me out, Planner Kowalski, if you know more than I do, but as far as I know, the Y lot, it's like 350 South 5th.
Yes.
It still ran into potentially some financing challenges because of increases to variety of cost factors. 121 Catherine is under construction.
Yeah, I don't think it's under construction yet. Has it started? But it's approved, so.
Yeah, if it's not under construction, they may be undergoing some of their other permitting, civil permitting and similar, but I know that they have received approval from their final planning approvals.
Yeah, and that's much further along. The Y lot, as Hank had mentioned, is still, it's more complicated, I think, is in a slower process. We haven't seen anything directly submitted for that yet.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments on the summary that Planner Kowalski gave, I'd like to let him enjoy the rest of his evening and drop off.
Thank you. It was nice to y'all.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any communications?
There should be one communication in your packet. I believe it was related to the 228 Packard project.
All right, and we have one more session of public comment. Same as before, to speak during public comment, please call 877-852-5247.
I'm so sorry. There is one item of unfinished business, which is also in your packet for today, which is your 2024 meeting calendar. So that would be wise to vote on while we have you all assembled. I'm sorry I neglected to mention that.
That's okay. Let's do the public comment thing and then go back to that. Just folks have been hanging around a long time. If anybody has anything to say, please raise your hand or dial in and we'll take care of that.
Okay. There are 2 hands raised. I'm going to share a timer. That number has just increased to 3. And Eisen, you have 3 minutes to address the design review board.
Hi, the summary that Hank Kelly and Alexis DeLeo did not mention our concerns about traffic congestion with the bus routes there and adding hundreds of cars to this area. I don't know, maybe that's not part of what you do, but it is a concern that we have. And then regarding the pedestrian unfriendliness of this, I appreciate that you noticed that as well. There used to be discussion of having indented kind of hemi courtyards along the sidewalk, places where people could sit on benches and you might have some trees, and I don't see that in any of these designs. In fact, the Standard, which is right behind my house, is functioning like a fortress with its internal spaces, but really nothing for pedestrians along the sidewalk. I just want to say the U of M building proposed south of this project is so beautiful. I do wish that we could get something like that. Again, the Standard, which I'm looking at out my kitchen window, it has some interesting corners on it, but after that, it degrades into some really boring stucco colored brick, and then even worse into what looks like painted aluminum siding, which I call the trailer park finish. I don't know how this got past you, but please don't let it happen again. It's pretty awful. They also have transparency that you asked for, but along Main Street, this is all completely closed off with opaque blinds, because what's transparent is into the bedrooms and living rooms of the people who live there. So these people effectively have no windows. There was talk of this being storefronts, which would be quite an improvement, but that's not what we got. Also, there was mention, I was relieved to hear, of preserving some of the historic area. There are no pictures that include what is northwest of this project, which is a cluster of 19th century historic houses, owner occupied and in beautiful condition. Do you please intend to preserve any of this? Or is the goal to obliterate all of it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Samuel. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm here with the owners of Pinball Pete's. I'll let him go first.
Hi, John, I have a question for you. The only time that I have heard from anyone with your team at Landmark was at the library meeting where the public spoke out in support of my business. And I'm hearing about deals and situations that have been extended to Pinball Pete's. I am the president, and I have spoke with no one from your company and or the landlord that you're buying the building from. So I'd like to get an answer for that, please.
Perfect. And now I will go. After listening to Mr. John's presentation, I have several concerns. My first concern is immediately after I finished speaking, I was advised that I may be in the wrong place with some of my complaints. Let me make it very clear. I will complain everywhere and anywhere I please, as loudly as I am legally allowed, until everyone can hear me and everyone knows what they need to do next, which in this case is stop making unaffordable housing in Ann Arbor. John and others mentioned that this might be a multifamily housing area. I looked up some prices from Landmark in other states, and one of the lowest prices I found was $1,200 per bed. Now, maybe I'm getting old, but they used to give me the price per unit, not per bed. So if we're talking a multifamily dwelling, 2 or 3 beds, we're talking $3,000, $4,000. Who is this affordable to? Again, I understand and respect that this community or this council may have a specific job and goal that is separate from the city council or the planning division or the design committee. But I am not going to be obfuscated by how complicated government and civics works by not speaking what I feel is wrong. And after hearing what my co-patriot here, the president of Pinball Pete, said, I encourage this planning commission to not do business with liars, because John stood before you here today on camera, and I hope he's still here so I can see him at the next meeting and maybe we can talk about this, and told you that he had a plan for Pinball Pete's. Another person on the planning committee said that they were really glad to hear about a plan for Pinball Pete's. I must be going dumb because I didn't hear anything. So I would really appreciate it if this planning committee stays on Landmark to make it so the city can stay what the city is, and it doesn't just turn into a whole bunch of transients coming in and out to go to school. There's towns like that. And I think you guys need to decide if you want to do business with people who are going to make Ann Arbor a town like that, or if you want Ann Arbor to be a town of families. And I do realize you're all appointed by the city council, and I will talk to them too about who to appoint next. Thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final caller is Kevon Hibati.
Hello, I just want to briefly mention that, again, I know it's been mentioned before, but I feel that when it comes to the parking, I don't feel that the parking would be an efficient use of the building when there are a couple of parking building structures already around the area on South University. Just to name a few, there's already the 4th Avenue parking, and there's the Air Garage parking, and there's the Church Street parking. I believe that one is more private use, but still there are dozens of parking structures around the area. And I don't believe that the building should have its own parking space, especially when Ann Arbor wants to be a city that is centered around walkability and, you know, more efficient use for pedestrians rather than constant vehicle use. So that's where I'll leave it for that. And the other thing is that I did also want to mention that I'm also appalled at the lying that I heard today from, I believe it was John, and I'm disappointed in that. And I really don't want to see that again. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our final I'm sorry, there is one other hand raised. Mr. Majewski, do you have your hand raised for public comment? If you don't intend to make public comment, please lower your hand. Claudius Vincenz is next. Give me one moment to share our time again. You have permission to address the board.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, you've got some kind of an echo going on.
Can you hear me now better? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So for starters, I would like, you're probably not aware of this, that I'm calling from overseas and your phone in basically does not work for people who are trying to call in from abroad. And it cost me several $100s of phone money to just get this far. But I would like to talk about 228 Packard Street rezoning project. I was actually going to make the point that it was premature to have this project on the docket for tonight because none of the relevant expert analysis like traffic study, floodplain study, shade study, none of this has been done yet. And still it ended up on your docket. It shouldn't have. But you were smart enough to figure out what the big problem with this project is. It's scale, once again, too big. And so, but to make an informed decision and to be able to criticize point by point all the issues, all these studies should be available to you and to the public, and they were not. And so I would like to comment on the sustainability of this project. The developer aims for silver LED certification. This is the lowest level of certification obtainable. It's like saying we have learned from our past mistakes and now we propose to build a structure that includes a driveway. I'm referring to the courtyard. This is not at all compatible with the 820 goals for the city. Platinum LED certification would be needed for that. For example, the solar panels are sprinkled more as an architectural highlight than in the quantity and locations needed to substantially mitigate electricity consumption. How many kilowatts are they being proposed to produce? What are the capacity of the batteries installed to absorb excess production? All parking spots should be outfitted with EV chargers. Promises for future conversion are just promises and not enforceable. Geothermal heating is the norm for new developments, and the developer should not be allowed to disregard current zoning just because of that. What kind of geothermal heating is being installed? Is it covering all thermal needs of the building? Warm water, cooling? Again, the developers just present us with the fig leaf. No details are given. The value of existing structures are not at all commented on. They are not even shown. And they are certainly of great value from the sustainability point of view. And it's not assessed whatsoever.
Our next caller is phone number ending in 280. You have permission to address the board. Since they are joining by phone, perhaps just a second to allow them time to handle their unmuting. You can try *6 to unmute. Phone number ending in 280. Last call. Okay, they have lowered their hand. That concludes our public comment.
Okay, thank you. So going back to John, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something? Oh, you need to unmute.
Sorry, I have one quick question to Hank. Is there a way to incorporate the written communication from residents as well as the spoken in the report that is passed along? However brief.
The public comment is generally captured in the meeting minutes, and those will be circulated as a draft to you along with these staff comments. You'll probably see the staff comments first.
So there is a record of this, I guess that's all I'm asking.
There is a record of this as being broadcast by CTN, and typically those broadcasts are available later on the city's YouTube channel for CTN, as well as captured whether they were opposed or in favor of a particular project, and some summary of the gist of the comments are included in the minutes for the meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, on unfinished business, it looks like we have our calendar for the upcoming year. You need us to approve this, Hank?
Yes, unless you request a modification or have an objection. Of course, this board does meet on an as needed basis as we have projects that meet the criteria for DRB review.
Right. If anybody has any comments or objections to the calendar, I hope everybody's had a chance to take a look at it. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the motion carries. My only comment, and it doesn't have anything to do with the dates, Hank, is that I would really like to go back to meeting at City Hall instead of the cumbersome nature of these Zoom meetings. I'm not sure why we're not doing it. So I guess if you could take that back to the planning department and see what you can do.
We can certainly poll the DRB to see what the general consensus is for meeting online. There are increased staffing considerations with in-person meeting, not only for planning staff, but also for building security when there are public meetings. So there are some arguments that the virtual meetings do extend public participation opportunities. So I think it's something that we can take under consideration and circulate for further discussion with members, and something that I can discuss with Manager Leonard.
Well, and as far as the rest of the board is concerned, maybe I'm alone in this. So if other board members, I guess I'd be interested in everybody's kind of feedback on this issue. Do you like the remote meetings? Would you rather go back to City Hall? It's just a discussion I thought we ought to have.
I agree.
All right.
I'm open to either format, but if we were to move to City Hall, is there a way that we can have hybrid meeting that allowed broader participation from the public, even though we were all there in person? That seems like the way of the world today, and ideally we don't have to choose one or the other to promote the maximum accessibility.
Then if one of us is traveling, they could also participate. So That's good.
Those types of meetings, especially for hybrid board member participation, are very challenging. I can say that the non-voting meetings of the planning commission, for example, subcommittees or working sessions, are all held fully remotely. They're virtual because of the staffing that's involved and some of the other considerations about access that I just mentioned. Was introduced over COVID, but it has worked well for the department. So I would have to check with CTN to see how virtual participation would be. I personally would not suggest having a hybrid meeting where board members participated both remotely and in person. I think it would be my strong recommendation to choose one format. I actually cannot think of a board or commission in the city that conducts business that way because of the difficulty in moderating.
Okay, I understand.
We do sometimes patch in staff members for items for the planning commission, which are very brief over Zoom, but we tried that recently at our most recent commission meeting on December 5th, and we actually had a Zoom challenge, which ended up in the staff member being audio only, which was unfortunate. So typically we even ask staff to participate in person for their items.
All right. Anybody else have anything they want to mention? Well, I want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and I hope to see more of you all in 2024. We went a long time without a meeting this last spell, and then we end up with 2 in a day. So at any rate, I've enjoyed working with all of you, and I look forward to seeing you all next year.
Thanks, Jeff. You too.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I also
Have a
want to
great
say,
holiday.
I also want to say a quick thank you to the staff. Hank, Matt, Alexis, and Courtney have done a good job keeping us informed and keeping materials in front of us. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for your service and volunteering time with the city.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.